Do I have something to click? All right. I'm Hans Jagno. I'm heading the German Esports Federation, ESPD. I'm happy to be here. It's a great conference. It's a great festival. I'm really proud to be here. So thank you. And I will give you some insights today on our vision of a European esports organization, which might be a little bit different from what we heard just a couple of minutes ago, but that's the great spirit of having a dialogue, having a discourse about how we should be position ourselves as esports in the European system. So let's just start with the fact sheet. European esports, 56 million esports players in total in Europe. We have 77 million of total esports audience, and the interesting part about this is 75% of the audience is playing the games itself. Imagine that for any other sports. This is an insane number, which is very important to understand where esports is coming from and what we have to deal with it. So every part of the audience is mainly involved with questions of esports itself. So the players are thinking about like what is happening, and we have to integrate them into our thought and into this process. You see with the other numbers, and this is actually from 2017, so it's 2 years old. Esports has developed rapidly in this time from then. But Europe is one of the most important regions worldwide in terms of esports, making up actually 1/3 of the global revenues being made in Europe, and 20% of the world esports audience. This is very important to see. We have to understand, if we are talking about esports, that we don't have the system of a traditional sports coming in place, but we have a big variety of stakeholders in a 21st century digital society. Most importantly, developers and publishers, which is they are the IP holders, which makes it very different to just solely say, well, the players are going to regulate esports. If it comes to regulations and standards, they have to be certainly asked about what is going on with the products we are using to develop the sports. The second one is as important as well, and this is a very new term. This is community, digital communities. Players are organizing not in amateur clubs, they do more and more often, but the big variety of players is in digital communities. If you are logging into your game client, if you're connecting with friends on a digital way, this is the community we are speaking about, and esports is a bunch of communities coming together as one big community in itself, the esports community. And they have a big say in what is going to happen on an esports stage and in an esports game title. If you think about the loot box discussion, this is something the community really is taking a big part in. We saw that with Star Wars Battlefront 2, where there were a big community outrage, and the publisher actually changed the product to a more appealing kind of monetizing structure. This was why community is always important, and you should listen to communities. We have teams, we have athletes, we have national federations as one of many stakeholders. We have event organizers, we have agencies, we have sports media, traditional sports and sports club, and of course we have politics, as we saw today. This is very important. We have to bring everyone together, and we have to have a collaborative approach towards creating a good esports framework all over our nations as well as all over Europe. We have to think about esports as a sports movement, and this is very important because we have one core task, and this is developing a consensus of those esports stakeholders, what esports is all about. A philosophy of esports, so to say. We have to be on one page what esports is. I often heard the sentence, oh, well, esports, that is sports simulations. Just it's sports made digital. But that's not esports. That's only a small part of esports, and we have to have this common understanding on what esports really is. And from the publisher side, well, we claim that this is esports. We just put a marketing label on this, and then it's esports. No, it's not. Esports need the community to embrace it, and it needs the structural integrity of the games to actually be an esports title. This philosophy of esports has to be developed, and I think we're making good progress with a public debate about it. This is something you hear oftentimes on conference nowadays. You hear often, or you can read it on Reddit and stuff like that. Another big part of esports as a sports movement, as a collective movement, is to see esports achievements as part of a collective and individual identity. If you're good in esports, that means something to your own identity as well as the identity of the people you're surrounding yourself with. It's something that makes you proud, and that should make people around you proud, that should actually bring public recognition of your achievements. And that is a very, very big part. Having that identity is a very, very big part of creating a movement. Integrity is a very, very big part. To be sure that no one can cheat, that no one is doping, that everyone is playing by the rules. Also, esports has to function more and more, and it does actually, as social spaces. That means social spaces of coming together in the digital world, as well as on site. So you see more and more actual physical spaces popping up where people and players are going to meet and create communities, local communities, in reference to where they're from and who they want to play with. And we have to have core values to esports. This is some values you can see in sports in general: fair play, respect, diversity, but also something that is very unique to esports, and that is internationality. You are going to be connected to international players with one mouse click. You don't have to wait 2 years or 4 years. And that is something that makes esports really, really special. We are a globally connected society, and esports is the prime idea of that. So it's all about creating an ecosystem rather than creating an ecosystem. This is something I said in front of the IOC, and repeating itself over and over again, because this is one of the core ideas we have to create a European organization, as well as to be able to connect worldwide. An ecosystem is something where everyone looks after themselves, and so like my organization is the most important one, and other stakeholders are not that important. An ecosystem is where the stakeholders look after each other and strive for a collective and collaborative success in order to develop the ecosystem itself, and therefore let everyone profit from that. Coming to Esports Europe. Esports Europe is an idea we heard from many sides over the last couple of months and even years. And it's something we try to push forward as Germany, as well as with our partners in a lot of countries where we are presenting those ideas. We had, I'm sorry, we had in the last couple of months a variety of meetings in Kaohsiung, in Paris, in Berlin, and in Lausanne. Where we came together and spoke about this idea: let's get together as national federations, as well as bringing some stakeholders on a European level in and creating Esports Europe. We ended up in Berlin with the Berlin Declaration in Esports Vision for Europe, and this was in April. The key messages of the Berlin Declaration were: we have to have shared values, we have to create a unity of stakeholders, we have to be an independent region. Europe has to be an independent region on the global political field of esports. This is not something that is that was the standard. Right now we have global organizations like IESF, but also sports federations like GAISF and the IOC. And Europe wasn't represented as a region in those discussions. And that's why we have to have an independent region that, that actually takes care of European matters and European problems and European developments. One of the key messages of the Berlin Declaration was also moderation instead of regulation. We have to see ourselves as part of a stakeholder system where we are bound by different legal standards than it is in traditional sports organizations. The IP ownership of the publishers is a big part of this discussion, and we have to understand ourselves as a moderating partner instead of a governing body, and I think that is very important to understand. We have to also develop an esports identity, and we have to have a European identity, and that is something that is very important in the whole process. We have the freedom of Europe, we have the peace in Europe that we had for 50 years now, and that is something we have to extend as esports, and that is one of the core values we have to transport to a new generation to keep that idea of Europe alive. And actually in the current developments on the European scale, talking about Brexit, and we may be coming to this later. I see I only have 3.5 minutes, so it will be a short reference to that. But that is something where we can step in as esports and say, well, this is important to us. Europe is important to us. Our players are traveling between European countries with an ease never known before. We can't just cross the borders and play in any European country in the Union without being checked at the, without having visas, without being checked at the borders, to easily access. And we can choose if we want to play in Hungary. We can just come to Hungary and settle down. If we are playing in Germany, we want to play in Germany, we can just travel there and settle down. This is very important to the esports spirit in itself. We have to think about new federation formats. You just said we have a lot of shared knowledge from traditional sports organization, and I would support that idea. But I always say we have to think bigger than it is right now. We are the future, and we are at the Future Sports Conference. We are the future of sports, and we can also be the future of federations. And the first point is that we are a moderating power rather than a regulatory body or a governing body. I just explained this, but we are also can act, being an institution ourselves, as a link between digital communities that don't have an institutionalized body in itself, and institutions like politics, institutions like the publishers, institutions like other sports federations. And that is a very important link, and this is a very important task to do, to give the community a voice in those institutions with the knowledge we bring in our own federations and on a European scale. We just heard we have to work together with traditional sports, and that is something I really want to emphasize. If we're talking about FIFA or NBA 2K, we don't have to say this is that federation and this is that federation, and there's a line between them. But we can come together in a digital environment and work together to prosper that. To prosper basketball and NBA 2K, to prosper soccer and FIFA or PES. So this is very important to keep in mind. And we are able to finding new ways of sports democratic engagement. If you're thinking about how sports democracy right now works, it's mainly dominated by older people that are that have the time and the experience bringing that in, but they are voted on general assemblies, and there's actually no real connection between the players and the athletes and the leadership of those federations. We have to think about how can we solve that problem? How can we use digital advantages for a democracy in sports that is living up to the standards of the 21st century? We worked after the Lausanne meeting with we as Germany, with 4 other federations from Russia, from France, from Israel, and from Belgium to prepare the foundation of Esports Europe. It was, I'm sorry, it was an intense preparation. We had a lot of conflict resolution and legal work being done. And our goal is to present a full-scale proposal of a European structure in an organized founding meeting. Making sure that in this time there is a proper participation of national federations that are interested to join Esports Europe when it's being founded, and to keep stakeholders informed. This is the working structure we are currently working with. What we already done is start the host city bidding process. So where should the Esports Europe be located? This is a question where national federations can now play together with their public institutions, with the cities, city administrations, with the governments of their respective country. So we have different applications to choose from where this should be. And we will give, as an establishment committee, a recommendation on that. We are currently reviewing a first draft of statutes and membership criteria. And we are aiming for, after we have a participation process for all federations, we are aiming for November 2019 for the establishment of Esports Europe. So, One Europe, this is a question. Are we actually this One Europe? The question is answered to be no. I know that my time is up. I will just follow through with these slides and keep myself a little bit short. We see that we have different legal frameworks all over the European countries, and gaming as well as esports is sometimes regulated. Take France, for example. Some countries have government recognition, support, and/or regulation. Some countries have NOC recognized federations. Some countries have none of those official recognitions. So we have a fragmented picture in Europe, and we have to see where we can bring together from this very fragmented picture, where we can find a common ground between all European federations to have a European-based organization that brings everyone together without saying this is better than that. To find a way to communicate over this very different, mostly legal frameworks, and this very different inner constructions of the federations as well. The challenges is, on the one hand, we talked about this European Federation. We have to have a legal framework that works. European funding is also a challenge because we are not, as esports, we are not fitting in one place or another. We are between all tables. There is a lot that say it's not sports, so it doesn't be able to be organized in sports and get sports funding. Others say, well, it's not technology. It's kind of sports or media. So we are not able to participate in that funding either. And those are the most important funding places where you can strengthen the amateur and the amateur scenes of esports. And we have the challenge of Brexit, where we see what can happen if actually one country leaves the European Union, what happens to the status of the players, on people that work in the UK, in the esports scene, on tournaments that are planned in the UK. There comes a lot of questions, especially for visa. Is a esports player able to get visa in other European countries as a sports visa? So this is one of the most important questions we face in terms of practical dimensions. We come together as one. This is the most important statement we have to make. Europe always is working if we are coming together as one, and if we put aside our differences and embrace what we share. And this is something I want to give you for this conference. As a thought, I'm very happy to have that local collaboration between different nations, which is very, very important, and we try to aim to bring that to the European level. So thank you very much, and sorry for being a little bit over the